Welcome to Make EdTech 100. I'm Lindy, educator, K-12 EdTech advisor, and your host. This is a podcast where we keep it real about what actually works in classrooms. No hype, no overwhelm, just practical strategies, honest stories, and tools that make a real difference for teachers and students. So come along with me on a journey to make EdTech 100. I was at the TCA conference in San Antonio, Texas a few weeks ago, and at one of the evening events, I was chatting with some teachers, and one of them said, I got to meet Winston Churchill's grandson today, and I was like, okay, that's kind of random. And then I'm thinking, like, was he a keynote speaker? I didn't remember seeing that. Like, all right, whatever, then kind of forgot about it. And then the next day, it was in the last minutes of the expo hall time being opened, and I was trying to actually cut through the expo hall because if you missed it being open, you had to walk a very long ways to get around it, to get back to the main door, to get back to my hotel. So honestly, I was just kind of like trying to like jut through the expo hall and like run to the other side before it closed. Everybody was packing up their booths, and this one booth caught my eye, and I realized that I had missed it on my first go around of the expo hall. So I stopped and I learned all about scanning pens. I have one here. And the person that I was chatting with said, and our founder is dyslexic. That's kind of how all of this started and why he co-founded Scanning Pens. And by the way, he's also Winston Churchill's grandson. I was like, oh, there we go. That's where that connection came into play. And that person is Jack Churchill. I'm thrilled to have him on the podcast. He brings a global perspective, not just as the founder of an assistive technology company, but as someone who's navigated the world as a neurodivergent learner. Welcome to the podcast, Jack.
Oh, thanks, Lindy. I'm really delighted to be here, and I'm going to speak to my team in the US about making the booth stand out more so that you don't miss it on your first tour next time.
You know, I have to say though, it was good though because you guys were one of the only booths in the last 10 minutes of the expo hall that weren't packing up and already like
following the
starting
health and
to leave.
safety briefing, yeah.
Yeah. So
right.
That's part of why it caught my eye, and who knows why I missed. There's times where there was one person, a friend of mine, where I was like, how did I never see you in 5 days of TCA? She's like, I don't know, because our booth was literally right when you walked in the front door. So if you know me, I'm kind of an unobservant person. Like I'll walk by people I know down the street and be like, oh, didn't even notice you there. I'm like, sorry. So believe me, it's not your booth. It's
Okay,
Lindy.
Good.
What else should the audience know about you, Jack?
Well, I just start by saying I'm a great-grandson of Winston Churchill, which I'm incredibly proud of. My father was the grandson and carried the same name. I think one thing that I appreciate when I come to America, and I try not to talk about Churchill very much, really. I try and work in the world of EdTech, and most people probably might not know I'm any kind of descendant of someone famous, but what I would say is that Churchill was actually a son of an American woman. His mother was American, Jenny Jerome from Brooklyn. And so I'm always reminded that actually he's only half British and half American. And actually, I think that's probably one of the reasons he's quite an appealing politician from history in the United States. That's because
Interesting. Okay, American. I did not know that. I just learned something new.
But yeah, I'm dyslexic. I was diagnosed at the age of 14, and I never planned to go into the world of dyslexia or have an assistive technology business. It's just funny how things go full circle at some point. And I feel it's a really rewarding place to be in. It's probably almost as rewarding as being a teacher in a way, giving back every day, having people who use technology, and it's supporting them to be independent readers. It makes me so happy because I remember the struggles that I had at school and the challenges all around that. And I think technology is a huge enabler, which has made education better. It does have its challenges and we need to use it with care and caution, but I do feel technology is an amazing enabler, particularly for neurodivergent people.
I'm curious, tell me, what do educators and just society as a whole typically still get wrong or misunderstand about dyslexia that you would like to clear up any misconceptions or
Oh, I was wondering,
misunderstandings?
I was wondering what I would come up with, but actually, it's very obvious. It's still this idea that someone who is using assistive technology is cheating. I particularly
Mm,
find in America, where you guys are so advanced on your education and ed tech and all the rest, there is still this, we meet teachers all the time who are like, well, they shouldn't be using a piece of technology because that's obviously stopping them from actually learning. I had quite an interesting experience a few years ago. We used to go to the Dyslexia Association conferences, so the big International Dyslexia Association, which is the Orton Gillingham Club. Effectively, it's an amazing organization. It helps to turn people around and get young people who have really struggled, get them back into mainstream school, normally by the time they're 13, from my understanding. And they really do a lot of hard work on things like phonics, etc. But we used to go to these conferences, my stand, my booth, and quite often I found it hard to connect with some of the educators who were there. I was like, we've got this technology, it helps them to read instantly and to manage on their own. And they're like, nothing replaces good instructional teaching. And I'm agreeing with them. I'm saying nothing replaces good instructional teaching. But the penny dropped when one lady came by and she said, I know how you fit in here, which is the kids don't have 5 years to wait to learn to read. They've got homework to do tonight. And this is where technology is brilliant. It works alongside as a scaffold to support that individual through their learning journey, and they can dip in and out of it and use it whenever they so wish. And I think that is the magic of assistive technology.
I love that you mentioned that. That's something I want to talk about. I've been having this conversation a lot lately, especially when it comes to AI and generative AI in particular. Because now with generative AI, we can ask it, explain this more simply, or lower the reading level, or sometimes even customize the font or the font spacing. There's a lot more read aloud or speech to text to speech type features coming in. And sometimes I'm hearing this conversation in education that if we're constantly customizing, particularly it comes into play with lowering reading levels. So if somebody is not understanding what is there, they can say, hey, explain it like a kindergartner, or put it in a 500 Lexile score, whatever. That thing, we're basically making them dependent on that reading level and we're not moving them up. I'm curious, what's your thoughts on that? And is that creating a dependence or supporting the learner where they're at?
I think that's really interesting, and obviously it depends on the individual learner, and they should really be on a track to be progressing. I guess that's what the teacher would want at the end of the day, is for them to progress and be building. I would be surprised if they would use it on everything, as it were. Everything, every part of their learning is now with a Star Wars theme, or. But for sure, if you've got kids who are 2 years behind with their reading levels, why would you give them handouts or activities on their Chromebooks if they were above them? And I think what's really important at the end of the day is these children go through their education and they get some qualifications and they leave being confident young people ready to enter the workplace. And I think if you can deploy as a school or a teacher ways that help that person get a better education, I think that is fantastic. And one thing I've heard from going to conferences is if you've got a class of 25 kids, let's say, and you're teaching a particular subject, if you've got a profile set up of all the students, you can give them customized handouts effectively. So you might have one child who's a Hispanic speaker who doesn't have very good English skills. You might have another one who's partially sighted. It makes all the fonts bigger. This has to be better than them sitting there not being able to access the information at the end of the day. So yeah, I'm all for I think personalized learning journey, and I would hope as part of that they are on a acceleration to hitting the standards in the school rather than getting
That
left behind.
that word standards, that's the way I've been thinking about it and explaining it and talking to educators is everything we do in education is trying to meet the standard. We have standards that say this is what students should know, should understand, should learn. And if you are teaching the reading standards, then it might be the case that you need to make sure or know, can this student read at a 700 Lexile score, for example. And in that case, then you don't want it changed to a lower reading level. But if you're teaching science, social studies, math, basically any other topic other than reading, your job is to teach that content. And if the reading is what is the barrier between a
Hmm.
student understanding a science concept, or I hear this a lot with math. Math causes anxiety with so many people, and a lot of people that are not doing great get not having a good grade in math class. It's not that they don't understand the math, it's that they get stuck on the word problems.
I hear that a lot because actually our technology, these little portable pen scanners that roll over words and read aloud, are brilliant for those kids doing maths. They're not going to use it to scan over the algebra. It's not going to read the equations to them, but it's going to read those words,
Words.
trigonometry or a quadratic. There are complicated words in maths, just like there are
Mm-hmm.
in science and everything else. And we've got experience of because we're used quite widely in exams, particularly in the UK. There's a story of two girls who were at Wiltshire College, who was a big sort of college we were working with, and they'd failed their maths, national exams twice, and they then had one of our exam reader pens, and they sat there with headphones plugged in. Any words they were stuck on, scanned over it, they passed straight away as soon as they had access to the questions. If you can't read the question, you can't answer it. And as you said earlier, we're not testing these young people on their reading ability
Yep.
at every step. So there are some tests which they should obviously be tested at to learn their reading grade. We need to know that. It's very important as well. But 95% of the tests they take are not testing their reading ability, they're testing their knowledge or their application to a particular subject. I'm all for giving access, particularly for neurodivergent individuals, because they are going to be fantastic one day. If they can get through school and get out the other end and get into a job, they're going to be smashing it all the way out of the park because they are very good at certain things, but reading might just be their
Yep.
challenge, or writing, or whatever it might be, organizational skills.
That's the great thing about neurodivergency is you think different, you learn different, and that provides different strengths than people that are neurotypical. I love that part of it. You don't know this, but personally, and my husband listens to every episode, so he will hear this. He is dyslexic, never been officially diagnosed, but in his mid to late 30s, I finally just looked at him one day. I was like, oh my gosh, you have dyslexia. And then I was mad at myself as being an educator that hadn't seen it. He had flew under the radar, went to school in very, very rural Montana in the 90s when it really wasn't understood or identified at all. Like he was telling me the other day that if he gets an email and he's like, I have no idea what this person is trying to say in this email, he will just plug it into Claude or ChatGPT and just say, explain to me what this email is trying to say. Anyways, that's just a great example. I do want to dig more into scanning pens. So you mentioned, and if you're watching the video podcast, I've got one here. Jack has one here. So it literally looks like a pen that you hold in your hand, and you scan it. You run it across any text on a physical piece of paper of any kind, and it reads that text back to you. You can change the reading speed, you can make it slower, you can make it faster. It also translates text. So I know my local school district, Bozeman School District, one of their big goals, they're getting a lot more multilingual learners in the district. So that's a big push, is to have supports for those multilingual learners. So it translates anything. What else should people know about scanning pens?
I'm also chair of the British Assistive Technology Association, and all of this kind of assistive technology is brilliant for helping people in their everyday life, whether that be at school or as adults. And there's so much out there. I would encourage people to just start searching, what is the issue you're trying to solve and how to solve it. There is so many great resources, particularly in the States. You've got amazing organizations and like CAST who do UDL. And I would just tell people, go and explore what's out there. There's so much great stuff available. As far as our pen scanners are concerned, they are designed for printed materials. So we think as a company that paper, books are not, all these kind of paper-based resources are not going anywhere. We think that actually they're a big part of our life and certainly a big part of education. And we don't want to go to being based on a screen all day long. I think many of us as adults spend far too much time looking at a screen during our working week. And I certainly don't want my kids to be in front of a screen from dawn till dusk, and then they come home and get out another screen to look at. So I would say to you that our USP is working directly with printed based materials, and there's been a bit of a pushback in recent years as well to say, we should, I mean, Sweden has just gone totally back to paper-based learning. They said that a
Mm.
lot of digital-based learning elsewhere is not working terribly well, and so we need to be revisiting paper. So paper is really important. Our pens, they scan over words, they read to you aloud instantly. You can keep repeating back over and over again. They come with headphones, so
Mm.
no need to, it's very discreet. And if you're taking a test, you can be back in the main exam hall. You don't need to be in a separate room. It's removing that need for human readers all the time. When these young people get into the workplace, these human readers are going to disappear. So we need to be making them independent from as earlier age as possible. I think early age is really important too, because we get more stigma in high schools. So if young people are presented with equipment aged 13, 14 years old, they're more likely to go, no, it's not for me. I don't want to look different. Whereas if we can introduce assistive tech at younger age, elementary schools, then it gives them an opportunity to get on board with it, learn about it, realize it's not scary or different. It's just another way of supporting their learning. And as you've covered it off very well, the pens are very helpful for reading in class, exams, testing if it's paper-based exams, and also when they go into university and even in the workplace. And translation's quite a big thing now as well. We've only ever read in a dozen languages up until the last year, but now with the new pen which you have, the C Pen Reader 3, if you connect that up to the internet, to Wi-Fi, it will actually read to you in 50 languages and it will translate as well. And I know in your schools in the US and in the UK that there's plenty of people with English as additional language, and this just can give them that immediate support with accessing the information. And often those, if someone really is, let's say, a new arrival into the US or into the UK or wherever, often they're not very good in their own language. So they need to build strengths in their own language first before they can then build more strengths in a secondary language. And I think that's probably how educators approach things.
I also love that it has a dictionary, so it'll define words as well, which is really fantastic.
We added
So,
a Oxford Primary Dictionary actually onto it too, because a few years ago we only had a Collins one, which was very
okay.
advanced. So you scanned over the word cat, it would say computer aided teaching. And anyway, now with the Oxford Primary Dictionary, you scan over the word cat, it says, a fluffy household pet with a tail and
Yeah.
whiskers that chases mice. So it's much easier
Okay.
to access, as it were.
Yeah.
So that's where you might say, going back to earlier on, we've dumbed it down a bit, but it has made it much more accessible for the majority, which is fantastic.
I'm curious, do you have a story of a student, or it could just not necessarily a student, a user, where the scanning pen has been really transformational for them, or a story that's really stuck with you?
One thing I've really enjoyed about my trips to the US are meeting some of the young people who use my technology. The US is our second biggest market, so we sell thousands of pens into schools every year into the US, and we do a few dozen trade shows, conferences. I got to go to Portland, Oregon a few times in one year. We made a fantastic video with the International Dyslexia Association there, and I got to go to some schools and meet some of the individuals who use our technology. And one of the things they've got, which I just think is fantastic, and all you educators who are kind enough to listen to mine and Lindy's podcast today, thank you. But I would tell you that something like a student empowerment panel is just brilliant.
Mm.
So this is where, let's say, neurodivergent young people have found their own strategies for how they get through their day, how they become more productive, how they become more efficient. And that might be note-taking software, it might be voice to text or text to speech like a pen scanner or software on a device. So I went to an event where 10 of these young people at all different ages from the school. And it was an event put on for the local community in Portland. And they do it once a month. And a lot of people, a lot of families who had just discovered their child was dyslexic, let's say, had come along to that event. And they were sitting there, and each one of these young people had a table, and they would move around every 5 minutes. So let's say there were 8 tables. The young person demonstrating moved around all 8 tables every 5 minutes. And it showed to all those young people who just discovered that they had a neurodiversity, let's say, it showed to them that actually, look, this is where I can be in a year's time or 2 years' time. And wow, look at all this cool stuff that can help me get through my school day. How amazing is this? And then even help me with my homework. And they then actually afterwards sat at the front of the room and took Q&A, questions and answers from the audience. And it was so interesting because they were young people being asked. It wasn't like ask some specialists or experts questions. The young children who were watching, who had just discovered they were neurodivergent, asked questions like, "Do you get bullied as a dyslexic?" or "Do I ever get better from this?" Sort of thing. They asked questions that they might not have been willing to ask another adult. And anyway, one of those individuals really loves our pen, and I remember seeing him at a different conference, and I was saying, "Oh, people use our pens to pick out words or read sentences or paragraph. You'd never use it to read a whole book." And he said, "I have read whole books using your pen. It is the
My
best thing
gosh.
I have. I've read really long books." So he just really struggled with engaging with the text and some of the words, and he'd sit there scanning line after line, and that would be, I was generalizing, saying, "I'm surprised anyone would want to use," and he was like, "No, this has been a game changer for me. This is how I use it." So it's really been really important for me to try not to dictate how people should use
Hmm.
assistive tech. They all have their own different way of using it.
So in that case, would you just scan each line, like one line at a time?
You could scan a paragraph and then have it read to you.
Okay.
So you can turn the auto read off so that when you've
Okay.
scanned 4 or 5 lines, you can read it to you. Some people really like being able to see the text on the screen whilst hearing it. It's that multimodal
Yep.
approach,
Yep.
and it helps to connect with you. Text to speech there's plenty of evidence showing how it can really help you with your reading, as well as on top of great instructional teaching, I would say, at the end of the day.
Absolutely. I love that you mentioned the stigma. This is something I talk about a lot when I talk about accessibility and inclusive design and learning. And one thing that is happening in the US right now, which I think is really going to help with the stigma and this idea of what's necessary for some is beneficial to all, is we have a looming deadline, April 24th, 2026. Any US state and local governments, so that includes public schools in the US, are required to ensure that their digital content meets WCAG 2.1 level double A. That's a lot. I'll break that down. Accessibility standards under updated ADA regulations. So ADA is the Americans with Disabilities Act. And basically, if you're not familiar with the YCAG standards, there are 3 levels. There's A, double A, and triple A. So this says that you have to meet double A for all digital materials. That means websites, PDF documents, anything in an LMS platform, videos. Videos have to have captions now. Mobile apps, literally anything digital. And what the double A standards say, and this isn't comprehensive, but just the big things are captions for all videos. You have to have a strong color contrast. Content has to have the read aloud feature. So you have to have a text to speech feature. It has to be readable by screen readers. Your images have to have alt text because the screen reader can't read an image. That image has to have alt text saying what is in the image. That's just a few examples of what the AA standards mean. And in my experience, the majority of educators that I've mentioned this to have not even heard of this. And I should mention too, there is a size. So larger entities is the April 2026 deadline coming up here in a few weeks. Smaller entities, you have a whole nother year. So till April of 2027. So maybe that's part of it is I'm talking to those smaller districts about that. So I'm curious, knowing that information, if you're from a US public school or public entity of any type, how would scanning pens help you meet this compliance mandate or help you navigate in the interim of trying to meet this compliance mandate?
It's really interesting you mentioned this, Lindy, because actually I was in Orlando, Florida at the end of January for a big assistive technology conference, ATIA, which is just fantastic for any of you people who like assistive technology. It's the number one event worldwide to go to, and I can't recommend it more highly. But yeah, I was one of the speakers at the conference who I know a bit, who works in the world of AAC actually. He came up to me and he made a big point of coming over to me and he said, "Do you realize that these new standards are coming in April? And I think it's going to mean a big opportunity for people to embrace with reading pens again, like your C pens, Jack." And I hadn't thought about it till that point that this deadline was fast approaching and it was going to create a real problem for districts and schools up and down the country. And I think probably, I mean, where I've got to is that if paper-based materials are going to be handed out to individuals, we do immediately make those materials accessible. Our pens read fonts 6 to 22 point. They work with a variety of different colors. So I think we do offer a certain level of accessibility for some of the materials that the children are going to be presented with. Does
Yeah.
that answer your question,
Yeah,
Lindy?
yeah, it
You
does.
might have other ideas. I don't know.
Oh, no, I that's the way I see it is that, well, like I just said, I don't think I said the majority, but honestly, I'm thinking about it. I don't know if I've talked to a single person that works for a K-12 public school in the US that knew about this new regulation and this new compliance
Wow.
standard. So, and it could just be that I'm talking to people in smaller districts who are like, hey, we got another year. It's fine. We can figure it out. That could be the case. I will say that I've been to, I think, 6 conferences since the first week of January, pretty much ed tech conferences. And I did not see a single session on the agenda talking about this or hear anybody talking about this. I'm sure little conversations were happening in the expo halls, but like I didn't go to any sessions that were talking about this. So, point being, and at the same time, by the way, that this is happening in the US, and I don't know, I'd be curious to hear what's happening in the UK and globally, but there's a huge conversation in the media that's this anti-tech in schools. Like you were just saying, Sweden is going back to more. That's kind of the conversation that the media is pushing right now in the US is that technology is terrible and this idea that everybody's going back to paper and pencil and we're pulling one-to-one devices out of classrooms and going back to computer labs. I need to do a whole podcast episode on this, but basically it's no surprise that I think that that is very misguided approach. It comes from a deep misunderstanding about how technology can be used really well. And I've always said, when you take the technology away, you are sometimes literally, and I'm not exaggerating, ruining the life of a neurodivergent learner that is relying on that technology. People with dyslexia, dysgraphia is another one. I always say that dysgraphia is like the dyslexia of the 90s. The modern dyslexia is very misunderstood. It's very misdiagnosed and not identified. And it's physically painful for people with dysgraphia to write with a pen and paper often, not always, but often. So that's an example of where that person really needs to have the ability to type. However, if you're at a school where you're still trying to figure out this compliance, or maybe your school is going more pen and paper, I 100% always say it's about balance, it's about moderation. So if that's the case, these scanning pens are an absolutely amazing way to provide that read aloud support, translate that normally you would have to have a digital material for that you can now use with print. Or you now have students that can go to the library and pull a physical book off the shelf and be able to use a scanning pen to still have the same experience that they would reading from an ebook or a digital book of some sort.
Or you would have had a human come and sit next to that child to help translate for them as well. Um,
Yes.
so, but
Which is not, which in the, at least the US, is not possible in the vast majority of schools.
it's not feasible anymore.
No.
Yeah, and that's where we see us fitting into a classroom environment is we're not hopefully taking away any teachers or jobs, but what we're doing is we're allowing that teaching support worker to move around the classroom and to work with more young people rather than just sitting with the one child who's really struggling. So that's where we see us as being a great kind of enabler. I'd just go back to the whole screen thing. I mean, remember it was COVID. Before COVID, none of us used Teams or Zoom or any of these things. The world, we're only 6 years on from the start of COVID now, and so much has happened in that time, technology-wise. It's been an incredible driver for change, which has been much needed, much called for. And I think some of the politics where we're at today is also aimed at the social media companies because obviously young people, as well as spending lots of time on their screens at school, they're also spending way too much time on their social media platforms at home, perhaps. So I think naturally we had to go to this position of we've had, particularly in the US, total immersion in screens now in many schools across the US. And I think it probably has gone too far to a certain extent. But I think it is really healthy now to have a bit of reflection. Like, where are we at? How are the reading scores doing? How do we actually blend paper and digital into the classrooms to make a win-win out of the situation? And I think that's probably where the conversation is going to end up quite soon. I think it would be a total disaster if you ended up taking all those Chromebooks down to the recycling center and getting rid of them. They need to be in the school, they need to be used. It's the same as AI. We need to have the young people, if they never use AI in school, they're not going to know how to use it when they leave school. So we need to have a blend of technology, paper, a blend of AI and no AI, because we don't want the AI doing everything for them, and we need to have them knowing how to use it as well. So let's use all these modern day technologies to the best of our ability. Let's have best practice. Let's help the smaller school districts to manage this, to navigate this. I remember sort of about 5, 6 years ago, there had been a big push to roll out Chromebooks across districts in the US. And I came across some schools who said, we loaded up with all these Chromebooks, but we never had the Wi-Fi bandwidth to be able to run them. We're in a very interesting place now. And I think a blend is definitely where we should end up.
Not all screen time is created equal. There's a big difference between being on a device and playing math games. Not to say there's a place for that, not to say that's bad, but if that's all you're doing with the technology, then of course the idea is going to be that we don't need this and let's go back to pen and paper. That's very different than creating and using the tech to build things and using the tech to translate and read aloud and personalize. Now, with generative AI, I always tell the teachers, I'm like, we have such a relevance problem in K-12 education. You can take any topic, no matter how obscure, how difficult, and you can tell it, relate it to what my students are interested: hockey, Fortnite, Minecraft, whatever it is. Like, those are examples of ways to leverage technology for positive, like the creation. I always push like the creation versus the consumption. I always tell teachers, ask yourself, is this use of technology, are my students creating or are they consuming? There are times where we need them to consume, but if they're consuming 90% of the time and more, then that's where you need to recheck. And that's where the technology maybe isn't doing exactly what you needed to do. And I love, you mentioned earlier, you said adults sit at screens all day. I talk about this all the time. Such, I don't know if you call it irony and oxymoron of the conversation that, well, we don't want kids staring at screens all day, but what do the majority of adults do when they get into the workforce? You stare at a screen all day. And we don't want anybody to stare at screens all day. So in general, we need to come as a society with just like touch grass, right? Find more moderation and let's use the technology for things that are really transformational and not just substituting what you could do without the technology. And your scanning pens are a great example of that.
They're definitely kind of mid-tech, I would say. They're kind of like a combination, aren't they, of technology and old style
But they are, they're
learning in a way.
screenless. They're screenless.
Yeah,
Well, there's a little tiny
they've got a little
screen.
screen.
A little tiny screen. Yeah, but for the
I
most
really, I
part,
really like, I
screenless.
really like the way that they're distraction free too, though. There's no messaging, there's no social media, there's no internet. So I found it really hard as a young person to study. I'm dyslexic, got very distracted at any opportunity to get distracted. I really believe in this whole idea of work hard, play hard, and I really love that concept of kind of locking yourself in the zone for a number of hours, working hard,
I'm
getting your
blocking.
jobs done. I could so easily try and do my work in 3 days, which I could actually get done in probably one morning if I didn't have all the outside distractions going on. So that's one of the reasons I really love what we do as well, because it just allows that person who would perhaps otherwise get easily distracted to be able to engage and focus and not have pings going off, pulling
Yep.
us elsewhere.
Yep. That's a really good point. Or people that have ADHD, being able to just look at a physical book page versus maybe distractions that might happen on a website with ads and all sorts of other fun things. So you've been in assistive technology for over 20 years. You've been on the board of assistive technology organizations. Tell me, what has changed for the better? What are we getting right versus what are we still not getting right when it comes to assistive tech in general?
Well, I think there's still a lot of people who don't know about assistive tech, and I think professional development, helping teachers and even parents to a certain extent to learn what there is available, I think would be fantastic. Certainly here in the UK, we've just the government's followed the lending library approach, which I know you've had federally mandated for is that 30 or 40 years now in the US, which is amazing. Gives an opportunity for people to try out technology and see how they get on with it. This has just been rolled out to 30 districts. We call them local educational authorities here. And I think lending libraries are amazing because they give you that opportunity to try, or even the school to try stuff without having to necessarily purchase it. I think more of that's really good. I think they should be encouraged. I don't want to see any changes to the US lending libraries. I think they're really valuable both for schools and for parents and adults as well who need to try equipment. We all get disabilities at some point in our life. It's very easy to think perhaps as a fully functioning adult that I don't have any learning differences or any disabilities in any way, but actually all of us at some point in our life will experience low vision or hearing loss or maybe break an arm for 2 or 3 months. And
Have to be on
in fact,
crutches. I've had that before.
yeah, if you were trying to do your podcast or trying to work whilst on crutches, assistive technology comes to your rescue now very quickly. You can
Hmm.
talk to your computer, you can talk to your devices, you can probably carry on to a certain extent without your colleagues even knowing that you've hurt yourself or encountered a disability. I'd say more training, more knowledge raising, awareness as far as assistive technology is concerned. I quite like there's a push. We still perhaps send people for assessments and all the rest, but certainly I'm noticing more screening software being deployed at a younger age. And let's try and make the classrooms more inclusive and more accessible to all. Let's not wait for someone to have to go through lawyers or get an educational psych assessment. Let's make the classrooms as inclusive as possible. My colleague Julia Clouter, who's an educator, she talks about a toolbox approach so that perhaps in your elementary school, you've got a toolbox of kit that sits in the classroom, and different people at different times of the day may want to use different colored overlays or try fidget spinners or assistive technology. Have a box of tricks up your sleeve which can be accessible, which students can go over and pick up and use when they feel they need it. Have you seen these sensory pods as well? You can have like a tent
Uh-huh.
with some colored lights in. Sometimes the day, and this is the same for everyone, not just those neurodivergent children or people with children with additional needs. But at certain points in your day, a bit of time out in an area which is just calm and relaxing. School environment is very stressful for many, not just for particular individuals.
I've started to see sensory rooms in airports too, public libraries. I've seen sensory rooms in public libraries. So yeah, we're starting to get spaces for people that have varying needs. And movie theaters are starting to offer
Mm.
specific screenings where the lights are on or the sound volume is lower or everybody has headphones on. I love to see that type of stuff happen. One thing I talk about with education is we're always surprised, we're always playing catch up. So, last question before we wrap up: what should educators be paying attention to right now so that they're not behind in 2 to 3 years when it comes to specifically accessibility, inclusive design?
I just think they need to keep up to date. I think I still love conferences. I love going out and meeting
Mm,
people. And I think that it's sad in a way if teachers are not given that time off to go and do that PD. I think going out,
agreed.
getting the professional development a few times a year, being there with your peer group. I mean, forget what's being talked about by the people at the front of the hall, but to actually have a coffee with people who are in your community, in your sector, who are experiencing similar problems to you. So I think I would encourage all the educators on this call to go out this year and to make sure they go to a conference that will help them grow their knowledge, grow their awareness, and connect with like-minded individuals. And if you're unable to do that, then do more of these podcasts, because this is a fantastic way to get up to date. We never had this 15, 20 years ago. The knowledge we've got at our fingertips to learn and to grow, whether that's using podcasts, which have had a real rejuvenation since COVID, I would say, which has been brilliant,
Hmm.
but also AI. How amazing just to have something on your phone, you type in, how can I support a Hispanic student who's struggling with writing right now? And you can get some resources straight up in front of you immediately. And a lot of companies too, like ours, we offer free 30-day trials. So get in touch with whatever that resource is and see whether those companies, whether it be software or hardware like us, see whether they will give you a 30-day trial to use it with those individuals. The last thing we want is people having our equipment sitting in cupboards. We'd rather they didn't buy it at the end of the day. We only want them to have it if they're actively using it with individuals and making a difference to outcomes at the end of the day.
I always tell teachers now, you're not alone anymore. You can use a large language model as a thought partner if you use it correctly, right? Like you said, go in and say, I have a student that's struggling with this or is challenged by this. Give me ideas. It used to be that that was just you and your brain, or if you were lucky, you had a co teacher or a teacher down the hall or a PLC that you could talk about. I live in Montana. We're very, 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 very rural, and most teachers are the only one of their kind in the building. You have one first grade teacher, you have one math teacher, you have one English teacher, and it can feel very isolating. And now, at any moment, 24/7, you have this thought
Mm.
partner that you can reach out to and get ideas. It doesn't mean you have to take those ideas. Oftentimes, I get an initial spark of an idea from the large language model, and then that's the spark I needed to just grow. It's like, oh, right? It gives me that idea, and then I can just grow and take it in my own way. Wrapping up here, how can listeners connect with you?
Well, our company is called scanningpens.com. So you can go there and look at the various different portable pen scanners that we have on offer. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm very active there. That's probably my number one social media outlet nowadays. And so feel free to connect with me, send me a message. I'd love to hear what you thought of this talk. And I'm just so grateful for you, Lindy, for having me on today. Thank you so much.
Last thing, we end every episode of this podcast. It's called Make Ed Tech 100. So I end every episode with a Make Ed Tech 100 moment to leave listeners with. What would be your moment that you would want listeners to leave with?
I think that assistive technology is a great enabler and essential for some, useful for all.
It. All right. Thank you so much, Jack. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks a lot, Lindy.
Thanks for joining Make EdTech 100. I know educator time is valuable, and I'm honored you choose to spend yours with me. For more EdTech strategies you can use tomorrow and ways to bring me to your school or event, head to lindyhawk.com. If this episode resonated, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. I'm Lindy Hawk. Go forth and make EdTech 100.